Imagine surviving a massacre where the police just killed 34 of your friends, only to be handcuffed 2 weeks later and charged with their murders. Not the police who fired the guns, not the mine executives who called in the state, the surviving miners. The state used a law from 1956 called the Common Purpose Doctrine. It's a legal relic from the apartheid era. The argument? Because these miners were in a crowd that confronted police, they were legally responsible for the bullets the police fired into them. This happened in a democratic South Africa. 13 years later, not a single official has been convicted for the killings. But 270 miners were almost sent to prison for their own tragedy. Let's talk about how that is possible. If you know the name Marikana, you probably know the headline: "A strike turned violent and 34 people died." But the headline version ignores the architecture of what came next. It's not just that nobody was prosecuted for the deaths. It's that within 2 weeks, the government reached back into the apartheid toolbox to punish the survivors. This isn't just a story about a labor dispute. This is a story about what a new democracy chooses to protect and who it decides to crush when those two things collide. The men at the center of this worked for Lonmin, the world's third largest platinum producer. They were rock drill operators, one of the most dangerous jobs on Earth. Their monthly wage was about $480. They wanted $1,500. When their union refused to represent them, the workers gathered on a public hillock near the mine. They carried sticks and spears to the police. This was a threat. To the miners, it was a cultural symbol of dignity in a dispute. By August 15th, 10 people had already died in clashes between strikers, security, and police. The tension was at a breaking point, and that evening, the South African police made a decision that would change the country forever. On the morning of August 16th, the police surrounded the hill with armored vehicles, snipers, and live ammunition. At 4 p.m., the order was given to disperse the crowd. What followed wasn't a clash, it was an execution in 2 acts. Police fired over 300 rounds of live ammo in just 12 seconds. 16 miners died instantly. The survivors fled into the rocks to hide. The police pursued them. They fired 195 more rounds. Another 17 miners were killed, most of them while hiding or fleeing. 34 dead, 78 injured, 250 arrested. It was the most lethal use of force against civilians since the darkest days of apartheid. But this time, it was a democracy pulling the trigger. The real shock came 2 weeks later. Prosecutors didn't go after the officers who fired 595 bullets. They charged the *** to 170 surviving miners ** with murder. They used the Common Purpose Law. It was the same tool the white supremacist regime used to criminalize black resistance decades earlier. The global outcry was so loud that the charges were eventually dropped, but the message was sent. The state had chosen a side, and it wasn't the side of the workers. Here is the detail you won't find in the headlines. The day before the massacre, a senior Lonmin board member sent an email. He didn't call for peace. He called the strike dastardly criminal and demanded concomitant action. He used his direct line to the Minister of Police and the Minister of Mines to pressure them to act. That board member's name was Cyril Ramaphosa. A massive 646-page inquiry later cleared him of criminal wrongdoing, saying there wasn't enough evidence to prove he caused the killings. 2 years later, Ramaphosa became deputy president. Today, he is the president of South Africa. The official inquiry into Marikana lasted 3 years. It produced a mountain of paperwork, but it didn't recommend a single criminal prosecution for any official. No officers, no executives, no politicians. Since then, the few trials that have happened resulted in acquittals. 13 years later, families are still waiting for an apology. They are still waiting for compensation. Many have died waiting. Think about that number, 270. That is how many victims the state tried to turn into villains. The man who called for concomitant action from a boardroom now runs the country. The miners who wanted a living wage are still struggling. And the law used to oppress people under apartheid is still sitting in the drawer, ready to be used again. It leaves us with one question: when a democracy uses the tools of the oppressor against its own people, is it still a democracy? Let me know what you think in the comments. Stay in the playlist. The next case takes us across the ocean, where another common purpose case changed everything.